Good evening. My name is Yvonne Arsenault, and I'll be discussing capital expenditure. So, a little background. Worthwhile Hospital has a total capital expenditure of $5 million for the next 3 years. They've already committed $3 million for capital assets, and the remaining $2 million will be for new projects, assets, and programs. So normally Worthwhile, they will divide their capital monies into inpatient purposes and outpatient purposes. But this year, we have decided to go 50-50 with the funding. So the decision to evaluate the basis of the criteria, it's normally done by the net present value, which is NPV. It is a benefit cost ratio, internal rate of return, which is IRR, and payback period. So Ted and his strategy to ensure the capital expenditure funding proposal is a worthwhile investment. He has decided to use the criteria of the NPV and the IRR. So the surgery unit runs at a 90% capacity, so only 10% of its capital is remaining. Oh, excuse me, capacity is remaining. If there is a bonus point for funding expanding the existing programs. So Ted would stand to gain by highlighting that he is asking for funds for the purpose of expanding. Compared to the cardiac unit, which needs upgrades and equipment, which would tie up a lot of their cash flow. So the IRR of Ted's proposal would be higher for the cardiac unit, and this is because the IRR is the rate which makes the NPV as nil and cash flows lower. So in this case of Ted's proposal, it would be a higher IRR. So Ted should use a strategy of getting the bonus points, highlighting a better IRR for his project. And the IRR is a superior criteria to judge the capital investment proposal that Ted highlights. Since Jody Smith supervises the ICU, he's at an advantage of obtaining funds for the ICU because it's an emergency unit. So the need to maintain the latest technology is mandatory for the hospital board. So Mr. Smith should present his proposal for evaluation. Being an expenditure for ICU, it was a high chance of getting it accepted. But in order to earn bonus points, he has to lay out what specific plans that he wants to do for the ICU unit. Therefore, he should choose upgrading the existing equipment that is used in the ICU, and since it hasn't been upgraded for several years. So the money should be spent wisely, and Mr. Smith should request the upgrade only if it's required. The budget and decision for capital expenditure is truly critical to achieving the success of the company. The first step is a necessary evaluation of plan, which is usually done before you make the request. Only two people must have the final approval, and that's the financial controller, and any one of them has to be the head of finance. They have the final decision because the evaluation process involves many technical matters from the finance point of view, and the financial controller is the one who will be able to analyze and evaluate the whole budget and a decision for the capital expenditure, because that person is aware of the techniques that matter for that. So the other person is the divisional manager, who is the head of the division in which the capital expenditure is going to incur. For example, if you're going to buy machines to improve production process, then the production manager needs to be included on the decision process because he can help you to determine the incremental cash flow and saving techniques for buying the machines. So the future cash flow and incremental cash flow are important in the evaluation process. Each person indicated does have some risk involved, but for the most part, we find that the cash flow for that particular project is necessary. And so the technique, like the NPV, which is the net present value, justifies the investment. So the cash flow is discontinued with the cost of the capital of the project.